So tonight, what I mainly wanted to focus on was the allegations against Russell Brand, the comedian, former TV and movie star, and current uh, big name podcaster, over 6 million subscribers to his YouTube show, for example, who has been accused by uh, several women of rape or sexual assault. And that allegation was published in the London Times and the Sunday Times and in a documentary on Channel 4 in the UK. And so I was also going to talk some about the climate change march and the climate change movement generally and how I would assess that. I don't know if I'll have time to do that today, and I wanted to take a more in-depth look at that. So I may do a video sometime midweek about that, but maybe we'll touch on that. So to start with, I just want to refresh your memory on what happened about 3.5 years ago, near the end of the Democratic presidential primaries. And what happened was that it was down to Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama having persuaded all the other candidates to get out of the race and back and endorse Joe Biden, which they did. And Sanders had started out with a great deal of momentum and then lost that and wound up not being as competitive as he was in 2016. And there were a lot of reasons for that. But anyway, in March of 2020, Tara Reade, a former member of Joe Biden's staff when he was a senator from Delaware, accused him of raping her when she was on his staff in the early 90s. And then about almost exactly a year prior to that, April of 2019, late March, early April, 8 women, including Reade, had accused Biden of various forms of groping or sexual harassment. And the other 7 women, not to mention the many girls and women who Joe Biden was caught on camera sexually harassing, were virtually ignored by the Democratic Party establishment. And Tara Reade, for her sake, for her part, rather, was so relentlessly smeared after her rape allegation against Joe Biden in 2020, following in the steps of her sexual harassment allegation in 2019. She was smeared by the Democratic Party so relentlessly that, fearing for her safety, ultimately she sought and received political asylum in Russia. So she lives in Moscow now. The Democrats chased her out of the country, basically. And if you recall, 2020 was only 3 years after the onset of the Me Too movement in the wake of the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, the Trump nominee for Supreme Court. And at that time, not only did that prompt a lot of women to come forward about sexual assault having happened to them that they hadn't previously spoken about, but also various other public figures, most famously movie producer Harvey Weinstein, were also accused of many different sorts of, or were also accused by many women of sexual misconduct. And there was Bill Cosby and so forth. But there was just this major double standard where the Me Too movement was primarily driven by Democrats and liberal media outlets who gave extensive, highly favorable coverage to Christine Blasey Ford, one of the accusers of Brett Kavanaugh, and the one who testified before Congress. So highly favorable coverage for an accuser of a Republican, but just a complete flip when it came to Joe Biden, the preferred nominee of the DNC establishment for president. They just denied that her allegations had any merit, even though they were quite detailed and corroborated. Now, of course, supporters of Trump and other Republicans who've been accused of sexual assault have done the same thing, where they believe allegations against Democrats, but not against Donald Trump or other Republicans. But you're refusing to acknowledge possible misdeeds by liked or admired others is hardly confined to members or supporters of the U.S.'s two major parties. So in 2019, there was a socialist organization in the United States, the International Socialist Organization, which dissolved largely because of the furor resulting from its steering committee's cover-up of a 2013 sexual assault allegation. And at almost the same time, 2013, a huge scandal erupted in the British Socialist Workers' Party, where party leaders not only dismissed female members' rape allegations against a senior party member, but they personally attacked them. And I've witnessed this sort of thing myself during the many decades that I've been involved in political activism and on the political left. So, about 20 years ago, a dear friend of mine and fellow activist, Lisa Spector, told me and other friends that her ex-boyfriend, Philip Anderson, who we all knew because we were all part of a local environmental group, had raped and stalked her. So, to just make a long story short, many of the people who knew Philip well, which I didn't, but I knew him and thought of him as kind of a friend, I guess, although I was closer to Lisa. But many who knew Philip well, even though they also, in many cases, knew Lisa well, didn't believe Lisa. And Lisa actually had a copy of a police report in which Philip essentially confirmed one of the incidents of stalking himself when he was interviewed by the police. So there was corroborating evidence in her case, even though she didn't make a police report of the rape, which I should mention, Lisa didn't tell us about until a few years after it allegedly happened. It presumably happened sometime in the late 90s when all this environmental activism was going on, and he was her boyfriend. And then, after she had been broken up with him for some time, she came forward to us, and we sort of launched a publicity campaign. Wound up getting sued by Philip Anderson for intentional infliction of emotional distress, even though all we put on the flyer, really, the main content of the flyer, was quotes from the police report that were quotes from him. But anyway, so my point is that even on the political left, we have lots of cases where people deny rape allegations against their fellow socialists or anarchists or radical activists or whatever. Then a few years after that, I had another experience with this phenomenon my partner and I were working with the animal rights organization Direct Action Everywhere, and we met up with a group of people for an event in Chicago. And among those in attendance were a fellow named Hugo, a member of the Chicago chapter of Direct Action Everywhere, and Heather from the New York chapter. And they kind of hit it off and began a relationship. And then a few months later, we learned that Hugo had allegedly shared nude photos of her, taken without her consent while she slept, with his male friends in the group when they sort of questioned whether he had slept with her. Which I'm not sure why, but anyway, he's like, oh yeah, well, take a look at this. And although the majority of people associated with the organization took Heather's side, it was really kind of shocking how many both members of Direct Action Everywhere, but mainly Facebook followers of the group, took Hugo's side and either refused to believe that he had done it and attacked Heather personally, or dismissed it as no big deal. So what? He shared nude pictures that he had taken without her consent, without and shared them without her consent because obviously she didn't even know about them, and supposedly this is no big deal. So, in short, ignoring or dismissing allegations of sexual misconduct is not a phenomenon confined to a particular political orientation or ideology. Rather, it's something that's commonplace throughout the political spectrum, including in what passes for the left in the West. And we're seeing it again in public reactions to the recent rape allegations against comedian and political commentator Russel Brand, who was really kind of a household name in the UK and US during the early 2000s, up through maybe 2015, through his radio and TV comedy shows and subsequently roles in a variety of Hollywood films, such as Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So, roughly a week ago yesterday, British media outlets, the Sunday Times and Times and Channel 4, released a story based on an investigation that they say they began in early 2019, 4.5 years ago. And in this story, 4 women reported that Brand had raped or sexually assaulted, as well as emotionally abused them. And other people quoted in the story made a variety of allegations about Brand behaving in a controlling, abusive, and sexually predatory manner. Some of those incidents took place in public, as we'll talk about. So, just to, in a nutshell, describe the most serious allegations, one woman alleged that Brand raped her against a wall in his Los Angeles home. This is a quote from the story here. She was treated at a rape crisis center on the same day, according to medical records. Text messages show that in the hours after leaving his house, she told Brand that she had been scared by him and felt taken advantage of, adding, "When a girl says no, it means no." Brand replied saying he was very sorry. And they do have a copy of the text message. I'll show that later. A second woman alleged that Brand assaulted her when he was 31 and she was 16 and still at school. Wait a minute, you might ask. She was 16 years old and a 31-year-old man was fucking her and he didn't get in trouble. Well, turns out that in the UK, where this incident allegedly took place, the age of consent is 16. So, it was legal, even though I would imagine even in the UK, most people would think it was highly unethical for an adult man to have sex with a 16-year-old girl, even if she had supposedly consented. And he has admitted that he had a relationship with this 16-year-old girl when he was 31. So he's admitted that part of it. Brand has. So this woman, going by the pseudonym Alice, which 3 out of the 4 women who reported allegations, are currently still anonymous. So anyway, Alice said that he referred to her as the child, sort of demeaning her during an emotionally abusive and controlling relationship that lasted for about 3 months. And that Brand once forced his penis down her throat, making her choke. She said she tried to push him off and said she had to punch him in the stomach to make him stop. So, just in case you're not clear about what that is, even if you're in a relationship with someone, if you just out of the blue force your penis in their mouth and make them deep throat you without their consent, that is rape. It used to be in the United States and the UK and a lot of other countries that it was perfectly legal for men to rape their wives. And that wasn't really considered rape because, he's your husband. He can have sex with you anytime he wants. Fortunately, in my opinion, laws were passed that said, yeah, there can be rape in marriage. Sex has to be consensual no matter what the pre-existing relationship of the people are. Anyway, a third woman claims that he sexually assaulted her while she worked with him in Los Angeles and that he threatened to take legal action if she told anyone else about her allegation. And then the fourth one described being sexually assaulted by Brand and him being physically and emotionally abusive towards her. And that fourth accuser, Jordan Martin, who was the only one of the 4 to disclose her name, actually came forward before the story was released. She actually wrote a book in 2015 about her 6-month relationship with Brand, which took place in 2007, and characterized him as a misogynist who abused me and as controlling him and manipulative. And also, she mentioned at one point in the book that on one occasion when they were having a fight basically, and she kind of walked away from him, and he came up behind her where she was in the bathroom and shoved his hand down her pants and fingered her without her consent. So all of the above allegations of sexual misconduct, as well as some that were made years ago or have been made since the Times article and the accompanying Channel 4 documentary, pertain to a period in the noughties, the 2000s and early 2010s, during which Brand was a household name as a stand-up comedian initially, and then a radio and TV personality and actor, starring, for example, in the film Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And by the way, you can read the Times article, certainly, no matter where you are. There's archived copies if you can't get access to it. And Channel 4, I guess, officially you can only watch if you're in the UK, but, if you have a VPN, you can watch things wherever you are. But anyway, regardless of the validity of allegations about Brand's private conduct with women, the fact that he at times behaved in a highly inappropriate and disrespectful manner towards women and sometimes toward men in public and even on national television is beyond dispute. So, some of this was reported in the Times story and the Channel 4 documentary, but had been reported before, back when it happened. In 2007, when Brand was hosting a radio show on BBC Radio 2, he interviewed a celebrity named Jimmy Savile, who personally I hadn't heard of until this story came out, but apparently he was very well known in the UK. And then, years later, he was exposed as a child molester, but that wasn't known at this time. But anyway, so in 2007 on his radio show, Brand interviewed Savile, telling him that he would like to meet him someday. And Savile responded that, he doesn't usually meet fellows, but if you've got a sister, then that's okay. So Brand responded, I've got a personal assistant, and then he gave his assistant's name. And part of her job description is that anyone I demand she greet, meet, massages, she has to do it. She's very attractive, Jimmy. So Brand then asked Savile, what would he like for her to be wearing when she met him? And Savile said he preferred that she be naked. And Brand responded, there's nothing wrong with that. So, this was, on the radio. Actually, it was a pre-recorded segment or a pre-recorded show, and somehow this part of it aired without any censorship, and it was a major scandal. Amazingly enough, Brand didn't get fired for this. But then in 2008, during an episode of the same show, there were several radio and TV shows that Brand had at various times. Brand and his co-host, Jonathan Ross, made lewd prank calls to Fawlty Towers TV star Andrew Sachs. They initially called him to ask if they could interview him, and he said he didn't have time. So they then called back his voicemail. And among many other things that they said in this really crass set of voicemails, they let him know that Brand had fucked his granddaughter, Georgina Belli. And this resulted in the BBC receiving a huge fine, and Brand's show was canceled. He wasn't actually a person who blurted that out initially. That was Ross, but then they kind of joked about it, and Brand made further reference to it, and they were kind of mocking the guy and his granddaughter. And so Andrew Sachs wrote a newspaper column a few years later discussing the pain that this incident had caused him and his granddaughter and the rest of the family. And Bailey also came out and said she really thought it was messed up what Brand and Ross had done. And I can't remember if I mentioned that, although he wasn't fired, I get the impression Brand was forced out because he resigned. And his show was over. And there were various other incidents, and we'll get into that later. But I want to just talk briefly about what led up to this this period of the last week or so, where after the announcement of the allegations, after the publication of the allegations on Channel 4 and in the Times, a lot of people, including some people, not the majority, but quite a few people on the left, dismissed the allegations. So basically, in recent years, Brand has sort of reinvented himself as a wellness guru / political commentator. He still has occasionally made some appearances on mainstream TV shows and in movies, but mainly, he does his YouTube and other social media shows. His YouTube channel, which he launched in 2017, currently has about 7 million followers. And he's perceived by a lot of people to be anti-establishment, whatever that means, because as I've talked about on this show before, there are many factions of the establishment. It's not a monolith. They don't always agree, even though they agree on basic thing that they're going to do whatever it takes, including violence if necessary, to keep us, to keep the working class down. But, anyway, so he's perceived by a lot on the left as anti-establishment, and many of his views are indeed progressive. So he's condemned the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians. He's spoken in support of political prisoners like Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. He's condemned capitalism and advocated socialism. He endorsed Jeremy Corbyn when he ran for prime minister. And he's condemned the war in Ukraine, NATO's proxy war in Ukraine, and the lavish funding of it by the U.S., his own country, the U.K., and various others. At the same time, in the past few years, he's increasingly moved toward promotion of conspiracy theories, particularly those related to COVID-19, such as the claim that COVID originated from a lab leak, or that COVID lockdowns and mask and vaccine mandates were part of some sort of authoritarian effort by elites to impose tighter control on the masses. Same opinion about the lockdowns. And he's also promoted quack treatments for COVID, such as ivermectin, as well as disparaging the safety and efficacy of vaccines, which I'll go into that a little bit later. But basically, this period, which has covered roughly the last 3 years of the COVID pandemic, has greatly increased his popularity. His social media channels have grown in subscribers quite a bit. So it's paying off for him. And these stances have won him a great deal of popularity among certain segment of the Western left, who, as I have talked about before, a certain faction of the left in the United States and other parts of the West buy into various claims about COVID and vaccines and so forth, which, by the way, YouTube, I don't buy into. I reject them, that are not supported by scientific evidence. So that's one of the biggest reasons why they like Russel Brand. And it's very noticeable when you look at prominent people on the left who have reacted to the publication of the allegations by proclaiming it to be part of some plot by the establishment to take Brand down. That they tend to be anti-vaxxers who buy into the narrative that many in the United States it's been mainly Republicans, people on the right, but also quite a few on the left. And the same thing's true in other Western countries. So anyway, as I'll get into in a minute, there was a strong reaction from a lot of people on the left to the allegations published by the Times and Channel 4, where they said, the establishment is trying to take Brand down. It's a plot. They perceive him as a threat. And, that's almost all they talk about, or perhaps all they talk about. Little to no attention paid to the allegations themselves or to the women who made them, or, in some cases, just outright disparaging the allegations and the women. So, let me show you some examples. No, ivermectin does not work. There's, like a whole bunch of studies on that. And, it works great for what it was supposed to work for, treating parasitic infections. but it doesn't kill viruses, other than in the sense that, if you put a bunch of bleach on something, it'll kill viruses, but you're not going to, inject yourself with bleach or, ingest it. And you shouldn't do that with ivermectin either, in the amounts that it would take to, kill COVID viruses. It's toxic. Um, it's not what you would do if you had parasites or were trying to avoid them. Anyway, that's a topic for another time, I guess. So let's talk about some examples. Of how people reacted to these allegations. Russel Brand got too big, told too much truth, challenged too many narratives, pissed off too many powerful people, and has a message that is too uniting, said Black in the Empire. Somebody responded, and raped too many women. Let's see what else we've got here. Misty Winston, Comrade Misty is Putin's buddy, is her Twitter handle. She's got me blocked because we had a bit of a dispute about vaccines and other stuff. But she says here, this is insane. If you dare to speak against power, they will seek to ruin your life. Nick Brana, the founder of the People's quote-unquote party, who has been accused of rape himself by a former member of the People's Party, says, here we go again with Russel Brand, the latest enemy of the corporate state that must be canceled. Anya Parampil of the Gray Zone. Beware when people are accused and convicted of crimes by the media, not the courts. So this is a common theme that keeps popping up in these narratives, is that, we shouldn't talk about, we shouldn't publicly look at and discuss the evidence about these sorts of cases. We should just let the police and the courts handle it. Well, ask women about how well that works out for them, especially if they're accusing somebody who's rich and famous and powerful. So we'll come back to that. But you're kind of naive. Max Blumenthal, also a Gray Zone and Anya Parampil's husband, says, if Russel Brand had just made the requisite celebrity pilgrimage to Zelensky and kept his mouth shut about the COVIDians, he would have dodged this bullet. Whatever the merits of the allegation might be, this much is obvious. Okay, so he's not outright dismissing the merits of the allegation, but he doesn't want to talk about the allegation. He only wants to promote his conspiracy theory, which may be true or maybe not. That the only reason supposedly that Russel Brand was accused, that these allegations came out, is that they're trying to take him down. Okay. let's see. I wanted to show you a couple more here, but they're not on my browser. Yeah, it's weird that I can't. Oh, okay. I need to. Switch out on this. I'm sorry. All right, I'm just going to read this to you. Jimmy Dore says, at Rusty Rockets is over the target, and so they use the same old trick they used against Assange. They do this to anyone who's a problem for the oligarchs. These are the easiest smears to make and the hardest to defend against. So Jimmy Dore is just completely denying that there's any merit to these allegations. It's just a smear. And then in another tweet, Jimmy shares a tweet from someone named Suleiman Ahmed, who says, so for some reason, according to their argument, Brand exhibits a pattern where all the quote-unquote raped women admit that they were already in sexual relationships with him. Why this bizarre pattern of exclusively raping women he's already having non-rape sexual relationships with? Well, that isn't quite true. Not all of the women are people who were in relationships with Brand. And, this is just classic rape apologism where, it can't be rape if, a woman has had consensual sex with a man previously. As I already told you about, my friend Lisa was in a relationship with a guy who subsequently raped her. There's laws against that. It doesn't matter whether you're married or cohabiting or dating or whatever. If somebody says no when you're trying to have sex with them, that means no. And if you refuse to abide by their wishes, you have raped them. So, quite disturbing. And his frequent co-host, named Kurt Metzger, he basically just said the allegations are BS. Kavork Almasian says it's a coordinated smear attack against Russel Brand. It's insane that anyone should lose the ability, excuse me, to earn money because of an accusation. YouTube's decision to demonetize Rusty Rockets is outrageous and hypocritical because they're happy to continue making money off his content. Okay, well, I mean, on its face, I can agree with that. They shouldn't demonetize him, prevent him from earning money from his videos through advertising revenue or share of advertising revenue when, uh, at this point, these are just allegations. But note that there isn't here, and there hasn't been in any of this person's tweets, any mention of the allegations themselves, And so someone commented, "It's insane that anyone should read the stories of his previous behavior and not once post expressing any sympathy or understanding for victims of sexual assault. But poor Russell." So, all the sympathy is for Russel Brand, basically none for the women who made the allegations. One of whom, as I said earlier, has made this allegation before in a 2015 book. So, are people who say this is a smear campaign suggesting that a person who wrote a book back in 2015, before Russel Brand even had his popular YouTube show that he has now, that she's somehow in on this too, Jordan Martin? It doesn't seem very likely. Wyatt Reed, who has done some great reporting on the Ukraine war and a number of other things, but is a bit of a conspiracy theorist, so he likes Russel Brand, says the operation to take down Russel Brand has just been exposed as an apparent British military psyop. The woman demanding social media companies demonetize his accounts is married to a former deputy commander of the 77th Brigade, the British Army's Psychological Warfare Division. Well, I mean, we don't know for a fact that this is the case. We do know that one person has publicly demanded that social media companies demonetize Russel Brand's account. But is he implying here that the whole thing, like the report of the four women's allegations and other people's allegations of lesser things about Russell Brand, that's that's all a psyop too, initiated by the British military? I mean, that they started 4.5 years ago, or further, depending on which allegation you want to talk about. That doesn't seem all that likely to me. Okay, well, let's talk a little more about the allegations and the corroborating evidence. Okay, so here's the article. Russel Brand accused of rape, sexual assaults, and abuse. 4 women, including one who was just 16, make allegations after an investigation by the Sunday Times, the Times, and Channel 4 dispatches. So, okay, I already read that part. Let me find a more detailed account later in the article here. Okay, so this is about a 16-year-old. As her taxi approached Russel Brand's home, Alice remembers the driver begging her not to go inside. Recognizing the destination, he had started to ask questions. So, according to Alice's account, and this would probably be corroborated by, a lot of people in the UK. At that time, it was already sort of public knowledge that Russel Brand had a way of being creepy with women. So he tried to warn her not to go inside. Alice admitted she was 16 and still in school. She says the driver replied that his daughter was the same age and entreated Alice, "Please, I'm asking you to not go in there. You could be my little girl and I would want someone to do this for her." He offered to take her home without charge, but Alice insisted she was fine. He had just such a sad look in his eyes, she recalls. Alice, whose name we've changed to protect her identity, now realizes that she wasn't fine. During a relationship that lasted for about 3 months when Brand was a BBC radio presenter, she says that he referred to her as the child and alleges that he became increasingly controlling and then emotionally and sexually abusive. Brand, then 30, sent a car to her secondary school to take her out of lessons and to his home, she says. A car that was paid for by the BBC, by the way, apparently, she says. And Brand asked her to save his name in her phone as Carly to deceive her parents. Brand's management knew that he had a teenage girlfriend and asked him not to be seen with her in public, she says. Alice alleges that Brand once forced his penis down her throat, making her choke, and that after trying to push him off, he only stopped after she hit him in the stomach. She says she was visibly upset after the incident. Okay, so Brand made his name in comedy in the early 2000s. After he gave up drugs in 2002, Brand filled that void with sex. He once said he could sleep with 80 women in a month. He was given the award of Shagger of the Year by the Sun, a British newspaper, 3 times. He was sleeping with, probably hundreds of women per year. Okay, so during the earliest stages of their relationship, Alice says Brand was very charming and very attentive, sending her verbose messages. She remembers feeling giddy and special. Before the first time they had sex, Alice says she told him she was a virgin and claims he was instantly aroused. He was like, "Oh my God, my baby," and picked me up and cradled me in his arms like a child and was stroking my hair. She says he became preoccupied with her being innocent and pure. Although Alice was over the age of consent in the UK, she and a family member who has also spoken to the Sunday Times to corroborate her story both describe Brand's behavior as grooming. Alice says he suggested how she could deceive her parents into allowing her to visit him and claims that he gave her scripts on how to lie to them. She also alleges that he told her not to trust her friends and they would all be looking to make money from it if she revealed she was seeing him. It was isolating, she says. Russell engaged in the behaviors of a groomer. Looking back, I think she's now like 30-something and is actually in the television business herself, apparently. But I didn't even know what that was then or what that looked like. Alice recalls that Brand told her never to send him sexual images, and she believed this was because of her age. Alice accuses Brand of being controlling. She says that once he ran a bath for her and demanded that she stay in it while he went out for about an hour. Another time, Alice alleges that Brand removed a condom during sex without her knowing. Then another incident, Alice's mother insisted on driving her over to emphasize to him this was a girl with loving parents. When Alice's mother went to meet Brand on the doorstep, Alice says that he blocked the door and leant down and kissed my mother on the mouth. She says that afterwards her mother was very, very upset at Brand's behavior and pleaded with Alice to come home with her, but Alice chose to stay. Toward the end of the relationship, Alice says that Brand sexually assaulted her, as we already talked about. As Alice lay on one side of the bed after the attack, she alleges that he climbed on top of her, held open her mouth, and drooled into it. I was gagging and trying to fight him off of me, but he's lying on top of me, so I can't. My limbs are trapped underneath him, and I just thought, why are you doing this? It can't even be any sexual gratification in this. And then he held my mouth shut and made me swallow it, and so I was just gagging and crying. The relationship ended when Brand invited her over one day, and she arrived to find another woman in his bed. So people that worked with Brand describe the situation as being one where during the show he would pick out attractive women in the audience and ask his assistants to go and get their phone numbers for him and their name and so forth, so he could meet up with them later and try to sleep with them. Another woman says that Brand flashed his penis at her in his dressing room and tried to get her to give him a blowjob. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot here in this article. You should definitely check it out. Following the scandal with them making prank calls to Andrew Sachs that I mentioned, he was forced out of the BBC, and so Brand moved to Los Angeles and tried to start a Hollywood film career, and did so. At a party one night, he met Nadia, a businesswoman who was then in her 30s. They exchanged numbers, and Brand later got in touch, and they began texting and talking on the phone. She said they met up in June 2012 at his house in LA and went on to have consensual sex. But she was unsettled by his glazed over look, which is something that several of the women mentioned, and I guess this is something that happens, your pupils dilate when you're really in certain kinds of arousal states, I guess. And from what I've read, this happens sometimes with narcissists when they so either are sort of detached from the situation, their mind is elsewhere, or they get really angry. Either way. During one text exchange, Brand suggested that Nadia bring a friend. Then they met again in the early hours of the morning of July 1st when she arrived at his house after he had pleaded with her to come over. When I walked in, he comes running out of the bedroom naked, and I'm kind of taken aback. I've got a bag on my shoulder, a little dress, and a coat on top. Nadia says Brand took her to a wall and kissed her and made a comment, something along the lines of, "I'll keep you safe." He then told her that a friend was already in the bedroom and that he wanted her to join them, according to Nadia. So he wanted to have a threesome. He just sprung this on her out of the blue, never talked to her about it before. I'm like, no, that's not happening. I don't care. That's not happening. We're not doing that. She says, I tried to get away from him and I slipped away from the wall. And then I went to another wall that had a painting on it, a huge painting, and my bag got actually stuck underneath that. And it's still on my arm. And at this point, he's grabbing at my underwear, pulling it to the side. Excuse me. Nadia alleges that she told Brand to get off her and that she wanted to leave, but he carried on He's a lot taller than me. He has that glazed look in his eye again, and I can't move. And I told him, get off, get off. Nadia claims that Brand pushed her up against the wall and raped her without a condom. And I've got to comment here that today I encountered somebody who made a big deal out of the fact that this last sentence that I read you is a paraphrase and not a quote from Nadia. He thought for some reason that was really fishy, that she hadn't been quoted here. And I pointed out, well, they interviewed her. You get the text of the interview, like, more of the text in, another article, and then you can watch the documentary and, see the whole interview. And she, says a number of times, yeah, he raped me. And then he blocks the door that I've come into because he doesn't want me going. He's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. Why would you be okay? You need to get away from me. And he's like, let's calm down. Nadia says that Brand eventually stepped away from the door, and she ran out, jumped in the car, and drove off. At 3:29 a.m., Brand sent Nadia a text message. He wrote, I'm sorry, that was crazy and selfish. I hope you can forgive me. I know you're a lovely person, X. Because he tried phoning her at 3:51 a.m., but the call went unanswered. Okay, so there's that. And then she responded, a few hours later, you scared the shit out of me. You're right. I am a lovely person. And for you to take advantage of me like that is unacceptable. She doesn't say that, but that's what she meant. You have a problem. You need help. It's dangerous that you think you can get your own way all the time. Do you know how scary you are when that glazed look comes over you? When a girl says no, it means no. Do I have to get myself tested? Last time you asked me condom or no condom. When I say condom, that doesn't mean it's optional. You don't have the best reputation. Obviously, this was a bad decision. I'm so disappointed. I'm very sorry, he said. You don't need to get tested. I will make this up to you somehow with love and kindness. Not my original idea, which was more sex. So, even in the midst of apology, he can't resist saying something obnoxious. Okay, so then she contacted friends and told them what happened, and then went to a rape treatment center that day. And the authors of the story say she shared a full copy of her treatment records, which state that she provided her underwear and other samples as evidence, which were frozen. An officer from the Los Angeles Police Department was alerted by the center, according to notes, but she chose not to make a police report, saying to the center she didn't think my words would mean anything up against his. The notes also state that she was worried that if her assailant's name is somehow released, then her name will be dragged through the dirt. So she had therapy for the next 5 months, she says. And she was contemplating pursuing charges against Brand, but ultimately she decided against it because she didn't think she would be able to prove it in court, because there's just a very low conviction rate in rape cases, and we'll talk more about that later. She wrote Brand a letter. She asked, do you know what you put me through, my body through? You scared the shit out of me on July 1st. I thought in any situation I would be strong enough to fight someone off. You completely broke me down. So, third allegation, Phoebe says she met Brand at an AA meeting. He had previously been a alcoholic and drug addict, so he was going to AA, so was she. She had a brief sexual relationship with him, which had ended by the time of the alleged attack in early 2013. Phoebe says the team working on a project with Brand at the time worked from different locations, including from his house. She was at his house when she realized that suddenly she was all alone with him. The other member of the staff had left. She describes being trapped in the bedroom and realizing that Brand wanted to have sex with her. She claimed he grabbed me and got me on the bed, tried to kiss her and remove her clothes as he pinned her down. Phoebe says, and I saw something come over his eyes, I swear to God, like black. His eyes had no more color. They were black like the devil, like a different person literally entered his body. So, as I said before, likely that's extreme pupil dilation, making it appear that a person's eyes have changed color. And so anyway, she said, I was screaming. I was like, what are you doing? Stop, please. You're my friend. I love you. Please don't do this. I don't want to do this. I think he had his hands down my trousers, but I was fighting so hard and I was screaming so hard, hoping I could get through somehow. She says that it feels like she was sexually assaulted, but he didn't rape her. He had his hand down her pants, but he stopped ultimately at that point. And then she says he proceeded to flip and get super angry, shouting, "Fuck you," and "You're fired." She says she fled Brand's home in tears, stopping only to grab her shoes before running barefoot to the car. As she left, Phoebe says she passed a group of people who had arrived at the house for a meeting about the project. Years later, she says she met one of the people who had been in the group, and says he pulled me aside and apologized to her for not coming in to help her, even though he had heard her screaming. Okay, so I guess 2014 was the year that his ex-girlfriend published her book, Not Entanglement with a Celebrity, where she talks about the abusive nature of the relationship. At one point, a sexual assault by Brand, as I mentioned, and that he was physically and emotionally abusive toward her, she alleges. So, there's a lot of other allegations that were made, not just the ones by the four women in this article. I mentioned the publicly humiliating, a couple of women, his assistant when he made a phone call to Jimmy Savile, and the granddaughter of the man that the actor that they made the prank call to, who he had slept with, and blabbing to the whole world without her consent that he did so. And there have been other allegations. There was a rape reported to the police that happened alleged rape, and it happened in 2003. There was one reported in 2006, I believe. Just recently, another allegation came out, published by the BBC, of Brand exposing himself to a woman in 2008. Okay, this article came out the following day. BBC and police begin inquiries, and as Russel Brand faces more claims. So this is a different. No, I guess this is also published in the Times, but also reported in the BBC. What I wanted to show you from this was just some things that Brand himself has said that kind of make him look like, at least during this period when these incidents are alleged to have occurred, he was a creep to women in general. This is he himself saying this in his autobiographies, My Bookie Wook and My Bookie Wook Part 2. As I escorted Michaela, a lap dancer who slapped him after sex, through the front door, I felt very strongly that I needed to avenge the slap. I spat in her face. So he's admitting there to assaulting a woman, not sexually, but saying disrespect. I was allowed to sleep in a girl named Penny's bed, top to toe. I spun gags and yarns till she let me turn around. I painted verbal pictures and begged until she kissed me. I lied and danced and evoked the spirit of Pan till reluctantly she removed her bra. I used tears and emotional blackmail to secure the immolation of her knickers. This girl was a sorry fair weather excuse for a prostitute. Then the phone rings again, and this is the worst act of misogyny I've committed since the spitting debacle, took her phone out of her hand and threw it at the wall. And there was also another incident. I can't remember if it was with one of the four women who made the allegations reported in the Times, or some other woman who accused him of misconduct. Where there was also a case of him breaking her phone, and after that incident he said, what kind of man was I, treating women this way? If this is what I'm telling you, can you imagine what's being left out? Okay, so you get the picture. There's quite a few allegations. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the kinds of excuses that people have made for Russel Brand. I alluded to some of them earlier, and I just wanted to take a look at them and talk about what's wrong with them. So people have over the years come up with rape apologist bingo cards. Just things that you hear people say who don't believe women when they report sexual assault. And some of them you hear very often or read very often when you see these defenses of Russel Brand. Things like innocent until proven guilty. It happened years ago. Why didn't you report it sooner? Why didn't you go to the police? I've never seen him be violent towards a woman. He seems like such a nice guy. Or but he's never tried anything with me. I've seen that one before, where women say, "Oh well, Russel Brand was very nice to me." So how could he have hurt any women? Anyway, Okay, so this person's not a leftist or a libertarian, but they said the Me Too movement is a joke. These women weren't assaulted. Why didn't they come forward when it allegedly happened? Now Russel Brand is exposing all kinds of shit, and they expect us to believe he's suddenly a rapist. Just like E. Jean Carroll and Christine Blasey Ford, these are mentally unstable women who get these fantasies in their head and then come forward with these made-up stories for their 5 minutes of fame. I stand with Russel Brand. This is just Hollywood's way of getting back at him. It is disgusting. So, I have a question for this idiot. How exactly do you become famous when nobody knows your fucking name? Are you kidding? That's so stupid. But, you know, why didn't they come forward sooner is the question. Well, why didn't they? How dare these women that Russell assaulted speak against him when he speaks against the establishment? Someone said. Half of all the people who are asking why women didn't come forward sooner. Because girls and women are not believed, called hysterical, and because there is so much inherent bias in the way that society judges women's testimonies about their own bodies. And just to share with you some facts about reporting of rape and sexual assault. First of all, overwhelmingly the victims are female, more than 90%. It's extremely common. According to one survey, nearly 1 in 5 women report having been raped or experienced an attempted rape at some point, and 1 in 6 women report having been stalked. I've known many women who have had these things happen to them. And as far as I can tell from conversations with female friends and what I've seen online, sexual harassment's, it's basically universal. And, it's quite often a precursor or accompaniment to sexual assault. So in other words, men who go around harassing women, which Russel Brand did, it's public knowledge, are a whole lot more likely than men who don't, certainly, to assault women. And hardly any rapes are reported to the police. In fact, research suggests that the majority of people who are raped don't even acknowledge it as rape at all, at least at first. And when they do tell others, they typically only tell a few close friends or relatives. Certainly extremely rare for a rape allegation to make national news. Depending on the study, somewhere between 5 and 23% of rapes. So somewhere between less than a fourth and 1 out of 20 are ever reported to the police. And when these reports are investigated by the police, only about 5% of the time are they deemed by the police to be false upon investigation. So, women don't report to the police or report even to their friends sometimes, or go public with allegations because they're not believed, and they get attacked. Look at what happened to Tara Reid when she came forward about her allegation against Joe Biden. It's smeared so viciously that she eventually had to flee the country. According to another study, the conviction rate of alleged rapists is less than 2%. That is why victims don't go to the police, and maybe why they feel more comfortable talking to the media. Lots of pig ignorant blokes need to have a long, hard look at themselves and ask how they would feel if it was their daughter. And that's a good point. Certainly when my partner told me early in our relationship that she had been raped before, as well as beaten by her former husband, raped by someone else. I believed her. Why would I not? Why would she make that up? So if your wife or your daughter or your sister told you she had been raped, would you tell her that you didn't believe her, or would you not believe her? Would you ask her why she didn't go to the police? Why didn't she report it sooner? Another common one is this notion that Russel Brand is being tried by the media and he's innocent until proven guilty, and blah blah blah. Why aren't you presuming he's innocent? But what exactly is the presumption of innocence? Other than code for misogynists to say, I will always believe a man over a woman. And really what it means is that in a legal setting, not anywhere else, just in a legal setting. Oh, I didn't even show that to you guys. I'm sorry. There you go. In a legal setting, at the beginning of a trial, you presume innocence. That is, you don't have any predetermined conclusions about whether the accused is innocent or guilty, and then you look at the evidence and you make a judgment based on the evidence, and so do the other jurors, and so is the judge, and so forth. It doesn't have anything to do with whether we should talk about allegations publicly and what the evidence is. It has nothing to do with that. So the reason why in these types of cases where the accused is somebody famous and rich and powerful, especially, already, as I told you, it's pretty rare for women who say they've been raped, according to surveys privately, they say they've been raped. They tell their family and friends. They don't tell most people. Yes, it is about presumption of innocence. Responding to someone's comment there, you don't even get into a courtroom in most cases. Like, even if you want to, just because you go to the police, that doesn't mean that your case is going to get anywhere. Doesn't mean you'll have the money to hire lawyers and so forth. And when women make these allegations, it's kind of a unique crime where the accuser is bullshit. It's about the fact that the media wouldn't be doing this right now unless he pissed off the oligarchy. This investigation has been going on for 4.5 years. And he wasn't doing a whole lot in 2019 to piss off, quote unquote, the oligarchy, which, and again, one of these allegations came out in 2014. There were many other allegations made before that. So it's not like this is a new thing. he's had this reputation of being kind of creepy for a very long time. And so you see this argument, innocent until proven guilty. Why are we trying him, in public, in the media, etc.? Well, look at the cases of famous, powerful men who have ultimately been accused by dozens of women of sexual misconduct, like Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein. Did the women who made the allegations go first to the courts or to the police? No, they went to the media. That's how the story got out there, and how certain momentum was built to get the case in court, and recruit other women to come forward. So it was a trickle at first, but eventually Cosby had something like 60 women accusing him of a similar pattern of drugging them, and then roofing them, and then raping them. Nothing would have ever happened to him if women who were his victims had taken the route that people like you are saying they should take. It just wouldn't work. It's kind of like building a social movement, as opposed to voting. Voting by itself, not that you can't use electoral politics as a tool to build a movement and build pressure and so forth, but it's what happens outside the context of electoral politics that drives change forward. And you can make a similar argument about cases of sexual assault involving rich, famous, powerful men. That certainly one woman is 99 times out of 100 not going to get anywhere if she, even if she's got the money, to bring the case forward. It's very rare. Another claim that I came across a lot in looking over some reactions to the allegations against Brand is, I don't want to take the time to play this here, but essentially Rose McGowan, who is one of Harvey Weinstein's accusers, said at one point in this brief video clip that she had a problem with the women in the current report choosing to stay anonymous. And she's like, well, who's going to believe them if they're anonymous? Well, I mean, in her own case, where she and other women were making allegations that Harvey Weinstein had assaulted them. Initially, at least, I assume it wasn't the case during the trial, but initially, many of the women who came forward in the Harvey Weinstein case chose to remain anonymous. It's just a typical practice to avoid, it's women's choice whether they want to reveal their identity or not. So Zainab Day, who is the woman who alleged that Nick Brana of the People's Party, had an abusive relationship and sexually assaulted her. Her response to what Rose said is, no, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. Trauma-informed journalists often protect the identity of victims and accusers, but vet the sources and let's see, am I showing this to you? Oops, no, sorry. Vet the sources and research. It's literally a standard journalistic practice and in place to prevent harassment and further harm. So, it's just standard practice in journalism. And so I said, indeed, women have every right to anonymity when they're making sexual misconduct allegations of power against powerful men for obvious reasons. Look at what happened to Tara Reade. And some of the accusers are not anonymous. In the case of the allegations against Russel Brand, Jordan Martin is not anonymous. She's one of the 4 accusers whose story was discussed in that article. Someone else points out Deep Throat, the anonymous sources of allegations about Richard Nixon and his staff's crimes in covering up Watergate. The multiple Jane Does in the Harvey Weinstein and Danny Masterson reporting. She knows this. Yeah. Anonymity is a right of accusers under British law. And respecting the accuser's wishes to remain anonymous is, it's just standard practice. Another thing that I've seen commonly, well, I guess I've already talked about this, just this false, conflation of Brand's case with Julian Assange's. And, in terms of what Julian Assange has accomplished to, what Julian Assange has accomplished to bring out the crimes of the establishment, where he's reported, WikiLeaks reported on allegations or excuse me, information they had received from sources all over the world about the misdeeds and crimes of corporations and governments. And, by comparison, I mean, what has Russel Brand done? He has a YouTube show. He has lots of viewers, but there's just no comparison between the two in terms of their level of threat to the political establishment. And there's also no comparison between the two in terms of the sheer volume of allegations. There were 2 women who, Swedish women who thought that it was a little fishy that Julian Assange had been so reluctant to wear a condom when he had sex with him, and they went to the police because they wanted him to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases to make sure they were safe. They never accused him of rape. The Swedish prosecution did that. And there's no other such allegations against Julian Assange. In Russel Brand's case, as I mentioned, there are multiple rape allegations or sexual assault allegations, and many, many instances of either alleged private sexual harassment by Brand, or also many public cases, on TV or on the radio. He's saying really demeaning or humiliating things about women, and in some cases naming them. So it's not like, I mean, we don't know if there's for sure if there's a fire in terms of yes, we can say definitively that these rape allegations are true. We weren't there, but there's a hell of a lot of smoke, right? So to dismiss the allegations out of hand and say that it's all just some plot to smear Russel Brand and take him down without actually looking at them and looking at what other corroborating evidence there is, it's just, it's ridiculous, and it's certainly not not something that I think has any place in socialist or radical politics. It's just not.